معالي الوزير إبراهيم إسماعيل إبراهيم.
Your Excellency, Minister Ibrahim, thank you very much for your advent to New York and for presiding over this important session of the Security Council. This interest is not a strange matter for your brotherly country, South Africa, which had suffered for decades, I say, from injustice, racial discrimination, repression, persecution by a minority which claimed its superiority over your genuine and sterling people just because it came from a European country. Mr. President, when Syria defended courageously the struggle of the ANC under the leadership of Mr. Nelson Mandela, who was in the prison of apartheid, some who was supposed to maintain or trusted to maintain international peace and security in this council considered him a terrorist. Therefore, I would like to reiterate my thanks to you for attending this session and for demonstrating the considerable interest by your country in the situation in the Middle East. Mr. President, some are strenuously attempting since the inscription of the item, the situation in the Middle East, on the agenda to transform the deliberations in the Council into mere delivery of statements and speeches that serve political purposes unrelated to the matter under discussion. Today we are meeting once again to call upon the Security Council to seriously take action and terminate Israel's occupation of the Arab land and to halt its racial and inhuman policies as well as its violations of international instruments and traditions, in addition to holding it accountable for the feverish settlement campaigns and the systematic killings of the civilians in the occupied Arab territories, Palestinian and others. We call upon the Council to help the Palestinian people gain all its legitimate rights, including its right, the establishment of its independent Palestinian state on the borders of the 4th of June 1967 with its capital Al-Quds or Jerusalem, along with the return of Palestinian refugees to their homes in accordance with Resolution 194 of 1948. This is the crux of this item, Mr. President, not anything else to be involved by others into these delegations and distracting the Council into maneuvers and pranks that do not serve the maintenance of international peace and security. Rather, they are designed to undermine international peace and security. We attentively listened to numerous interventions in the morning, and we were surprised that some speakers discovered enthusiastically that the topic of the item under discussion is no longer the situation in the Middle East. As you well know, it's an item which is directly related to terminating Israel's occupation of Arab territories and preventing the undermining of the peace process by the occupying power, Israel, and attracting the international community's attention to Israel's starting war in the region within an exposed and blatant coordination with some members here and some states in our region. Some, I say, have discovered that this item, the situation in the Middle East, has nothing to do with Israel and its occupation of the Arab territories. Rather, this item is related to Syria. At a time when others have come to the imaginary conclusion that the matter under discussion is Iran. Others may think that the item on the situation in the Middle East is no longer valid on the agenda of the Security Council, because the latter is of the view that Israel has actually applied and implemented the resolutions of international legitimacy when it assassinated the question of Palestine, the principles of international law, even if it has not withdrawn from the occupied territories, from the Golan, South Lebanon, Palestine, even if it has not ceased its machinery of repression, assassination, persecution in the occupied Arab territories, and even if it has not applied GA Resolution 194, stipulating the return of Palestinian refugees to their cities, villages, homes from which they were evicted in 1948 and 1967. This is the grand discovery made by some speakers this morning. Mr. President, despite all international demands and resolutions regarding the termination of Israel's occupation of the Arab territories and the establishment of the Palestinian state, the Security Council unfortunately has not risen to its responsibilities in accordance with the Charter, and no visible progress has been made at all. To the contrary, the situation is worsening in the light of an Israeli aggressive escalation and settlement activities that reached the highest level in 2011 compared to the last 10 years. The construction of settlements increased by 20% in 2011. This disturbing ratio was prepared by Alam Peace, the Israeli organization, in addition to the increase of settler aggression on Palestinian civilians, as well as Christian and Islamic holy sites, at a level of no less than 50% than the previous year. Adding to this, the hatred, adding to that, the extirpation of olive trees by Israeli authorities. The occupying power is criminally obsessed with cutting and eliminating the olive trees. All these attacks take place either by decisions from the Israeli government or under the protection of Israeli authorities. As of late, Israeli authorities evacuated 90,000 from their homes and villages. We stated time and again that this adversarial situation presages disastrous consequences and will enhance war at the expense of peace. It is disconcerting here that this Israeli escalation enjoys unqualified financial, military, and political backing by some states basically responsible for all the tensions and conflicts in our region since the agreement, the Convention of Sykes-Picot of 1916, and the launching of so-called the Promise of Balfour in 1917. Historic research has proven lately that the Convention of Sykes-Picot in 1916 is a confidential agreement between the two colonial powers, France and UK and Britain, was designed to prepare for the Balfour Declaration, which came a year later. These states that falsely arrogated to themselves the right of defending human rights, and they have nothing to do with this, and they claim that they are against settlement activities and for the establishment of two states. These states never took any action to stem or stop the settlement activities that would lead to the establishment of a Palestinian state and the establishment of peace. These states never even tried to criticize Israel or to bring any serious pressure upon Israel. Rather, they impede the Security Council from taking any action on this score. In this, we remind you that the United States prevented the issuance of a press statement condemning settlement, giving Israel an illegitimate immunity against all its crimes perpetrated in the occupied Arab territory. In this connection, Mr. President, we would like to state that the League of Arab States warned against the continued flow of finance from Europe and America to radical Israeli organizations that foster settlement in Palestine and occupied Syria and Golan. Here we have so many question marks, since the warning mentioned was not paid heed to by any of those states I just mentioned, like all resolutions, statements, and appeals made by the Arab League over long decades, all of which called for taking measures to halt Israeli massacres and violations in the occupied Arab territories. Yet these states themselves hastened to receive anything coming out of the League of Arab States with regard to Syria, while Syria is absent from the deliberations transpiring inside the Arab League, even if that position is not consensual. The purpose is to utilize this matter in a negative manner against Syria, using it as the Trojan horse to worsen and internationalize the situation in Syria in implementation of their flagrant interference agendas, as mentioned by some statements delivered this morning. That is despite the fact that a number of the member states of the League of Arab States reject making the League a device to call for external interference, since their mission has failed. Therefore, they targeted the credibility of the Arab observers torpedoing its reports with the intention of bringing aggression against Syria with all its forms, military, diplomatic, political, economic, information, regardless of the cost. Israel, defying international legitimacy, still refuses to return the occupied Syrian Golan to Syria and abide by the international legitimate resolutions, particularly Security Council Resolution 497 of 1981, which considered the annexation of the Golan, Syrian Golan, null and void and with no legal effect. Israel continues its settlement activities in the occupied Syrian Golan, terrorism, exercising the policy of apartheid and oppression against the Syrian citizens chafing under the yoke of its occupation. It also continues the inhuman coercive detention contrary to the UN standards for treatment of prisoners, let alone the Israeli occupation authorities' attempts to disjoint the occupied Syrian Golans as it does in by building a separation wall east of Majd al-Shams. That was not enough for Israel. It continued its aggressive policy in the Golan, tightening the grip on Syrian citizens, burning land, destroying crops, as well as the unfair distribution of water, taking the water of the lake of Mas'ada from the Golan, the occupied Golan, and transforming it to the farms of the settlers. This led to grave and considerable harm to the environment. We conveyed to the Secretary General and the members of the Security Council our official complaints. Regrettably, these complaints were not listened to. Rather, the representative of the Secretary General did not refer to these grave Israeli violations in their monthly briefings before the Security Council under this item, the situation in the Middle East. This encouraged Israel to persist in its aggressive policies, and this raises questions about the credibility of the Secretariat in dealing objectively with our legitimate issues. I would like here to express our dissatisfaction at the disregard by Mr. Taranko this morning. Disregard to mentioning the very bad situation in the occupied Syrian Golan. This disregard cannot be glossed over any further. Having drawn the attention of the Secretariat officials dozens of times for the need for their briefings to incorporate a paragraph on the latest Israeli practices in the occupied Syrian Golan, despite our acceptance of the minimal references in previous briefings. What happened today is egregious and necessitates that the Secretariat reconsider its position. In conclusion, Mr. President, I would like to welcome the new colleagues, members of this Council from Morocco, Pakistan, Azerbaijan, Guatemala, and Togo, wishing them every success and standing by the questions of justice and equity and rejecting hegemony.